What would happen if today we proved to the world that the Great Fire narratives all over the world are a massive, massive cover-up, proving that they were actually huge demolition projects, removing buildings that were built prior to 1776, and that the population of these massive cities were basically zero? What if I told you that today, after this episode, you will never think about the Great Fires the same way ever again? What if I told you that after this episode, you will never trust the mainstream history ever again? I've been waiting a long time to share this episode with the world. Are you ready to have your mind blown? Are you ready to see what we found today? Chicago, Illinois. We have the 1871 Great Fire, a fire that destroyed everything, over 17,500 buildings, and only left 6 buildings supposedly, killing basically nobody. 0.0008% of people died. Humans cannot inhale smoke. Not only do we have to keep the fire physically burning the individuals in mind, but also just as dangerous and a major cause of death from fires are actually inhaling smoke, taking only 2 to 10 minutes to pass out or even die. Fire burns oxygen, so as a fire continues to be active, more oxygen gets removed from the room. Keep this in mind as we continue. Here we have photos of all of the buildings. The whole city was supposedly destroyed by a fire. If this is true, then more than 300 people of the 334,000 people would have died. Today, in my opinion, will be the end of the mainstream history narrative. Let's all take a minute and thank all of our Patreons that keep this channel going and help it reach new people every single week. Welcome to episode 59 of my lunch break. I hope you're all having a great day, and if you're new, welcome.
There's a YouTube channel called My Lunch Break. It's called My Lunch Break YouTube channel. You will get addicted to that shit.
And I want to thank all of our sponsors over on Patreon. Thank you to FlatEarthDave.com. You can check out his app. I'll put the link in the description, and you can use my referral code, MLB. The app is awesome. It shows a lot of videos that are really hard to find. They've got them all in great playlists. He also has My Lunch Break on the homeschool section of the app, which is really cool. Thank you to Rebecca K, Don Gaston, Christopher Arietta, The Lady Lacey Show, David and Sherry Ferguson, Edwin Johnson, Chuck Templeton, Joy Lee, Leslie Pipkins, PNR, Stephanie Nolan, The Burlesons, Suez KC, Dan Woodall, Corey Franks, Dale, DJ Clicktrack, Edward and Brianna, Jacob Law, Jim Ribley and Christine Duggan, Kyle Glascock, Tim Rack, Two Spirit, William Richard Jeffries V, PKTFnews.org, Regna Saturna, Emerald H, 3D6.space, Attila Power, Buck Suey, Dakota Dunn, D-Rob33, Eric Martinez, Ivan Apoctoli, Jesse DeLeon, Jim Bro, Kit Kat, Todd K, Edwin Rice, Helmut, Charles Kruger, Daniel Zid, Antonio Kazievich, Glenn Gunderson, Pacific Crafted, Carla Fitzgerald, HaggardT-shirts.com, Meta, Jason Hochberg, Marie C., Roy Schoenholtz, James Alt, Dan McGee, Vince Moreno, Roz Matthews, Shiba Shaba in the Darkness, Spartan Oneg, and VKH Bonner. You guys are all awesome and helping this channel out a lot. One of two things is more likely than what they're telling us, and more probable mathematically, where all of the buildings are destroyed, yet nobody had an issue getting away. So either there were more people that died than just 0.008% of the population, when all of the 17,500 buildings were in flames, than we're actually being told about, which would make a lot more sense. But this is not the narrative that we're told. And to clear this up, and to give this a much clearer perspective, 1871, where people didn't even have cars yet. They had to ride their horses or run around in order to escape this fire. So that is option number one. The other option is that the population simply wasn't 300,000 people like we're being told. And these cities were actually empty, and the previous civilization was erased. And it was time, more specifically, a planned time, to demolish most of their work. And they just absolutely shredded these 17,500 buildings with massive bombs and explosives to destroy the old world civilization's construction. Buildings that would have given this entire false narrative away decades ago. Destroying 17,500 buildings before anyone really even started living in Shalaga again. And this option, in my opinion, seems like the most logical answer. Because why would only 300,000 people already have 17,500 buildings in the first place? I think this point alone proves that we are being lied to, that the mainstream history is not truthful. Right after this 1871 fire, they tell us that they just cleaned the whole thing up, and all these other brand new buildings are magically here again. For example, like we discussed in episode 58, the second Palmer House was completed just 4 years after the 1871 Great Fire. So we can see that the mainstream narrative has a ton of issues and flaws. It is becoming story hour. It's not factual information like we deserve at this point. And these questions that we're asking are just opening the floodgates for the truth to come through. We also have the Temple building to compare the Great Fire information to. The Temple building was the tallest building in Chicago. You know, the building that was owned by the Orient, which still meets today. And it also holds the narrative where the primary designer of the building and the primary representative, both of them, not one, both, died during the construction, which we have seen so many times. Where we also know from episode 58 that they moved to the new in 1926, where it's time to take this up a notch and really start to put this whole thing into perspective, and also go even deeper than we did in our last episode, because there is so much more to this story that we didn't cover yet. When the new building supposedly replaced an even earlier venue on the exact same site. So what happened to the first one? It opened in November of 1903, when the fire broke out 1 month later, in December of 1903. 1 month later, during a performance, and caused 602 deaths, and ranks as the #1 worst theater fire in the United States, even to this day. For nearly 100 years, this fire was the deadliest fire in one building in US history, now being #1. And get this, this theater was supposedly fireproof. 1 month after being opened, it burns down. This is incredible. And we have seen this exact story before from our St. Louis episodes, when they say that the fire started due to lighting the curtain on fire. So this curtain starts on fire, and the fire exits were locked or hidden, which sounds like a plan, opinion. Even if this wasn't a event, let's think logically here. In 1871, during the Chicago fire, when 17,500 stone and brick buildings were magically burned to the ground, even though we know that stone and brick does not burn to the ground from house fires, which is why you have stone and brick fireplaces inside your living room. And everyone all over the world remains extremely calm, and your neighbors don't seem to mind either. It doesn't and never will spread to their house or to the basement. It won't make your house look like a bomb went off. And I guess I should say don't try this at home. But come on, you get the point. Do you think that it's possible that they possibly by chance might not have been able to escape their homes? Or they were maybe up too high in one of the buildings to escape? Do you think that a group of people may have had some trouble escaping their building? Do you think that it's possible that more than one of the 17,500 buildings somewhere in Chicago that look like they were exploded might have crumbled on top of someone? Or is it even possible that maybe a single issue might have came up anywhere, like this theater did, where the door was jammed? They say that the Chicago fire started at 8:30 p.m. Do you think that maybe some people were sleeping and didn't realize there was a fire until it was too late? Were there possibly some individuals that had a broken leg or were disabled? Was there not a hospital with people in it that possibly couldn't escape the smoke? And if they did, where did everybody go? The fire was supposedly engulfing the roads and spreading to the next building. All 300,000 people would have been burnt to a crisp if the mainstream history tale was true. It would have been one massive bonfire, yet basically everybody survived. My point is, how is it mathematically possible that one building kills 600 people, yet 17,500 buildings kill 300 people? At which point does everyone understand that we are being lied to, and the mainstream history from only 150 years ago is a lie? So how can you believe something that the same people are telling us about from over 1,000 years ago? And how can we believe anything that we're being told by this group of people that lie constantly? Nearly every single one of these great fires happened in the 1800s, right after the 1776 date, which was when the USA began. The main Great Fire that predates this 1776 date falls on 1/6, which is the London Great Fire, which is where the USA originally came from. And I'm guessing, based on all of my research, that this date of 1/6 is a code and not a real event. Because I'm about to take this thing to a whole nother level from this point until the end of the episode. And we are going to destroy their narrative. So I hope you all have your popcorn ready. It's time to make our own history. Here we go. The Great Fire of London in 1/6 destroyed 13,200 houses, 87 parish churches, the Royal Exchange, Guildhall, and St. Paul's Cathedral. 13,200 houses. So there must have been thousands of casualties, right? 6 people died in the Great Fire of London. And this is when we know we have found something huge. When we go to New York, where they had the Great Fire of New York, destroying 700 buildings. And which year was that in again? I forget. Can somebody clear this up for me? Am I right? Or am I definitely right? That this operation worldwide began in 1776. The Great Fire of New York happened in 1776, holding only 2 deaths, covering 700 buildings. 2 people died in the entire Great Fire of New York. 700 buildings, and only 2 people in 1776? So what's the total at? We have 1 building in Chicago holding 600 deaths. I have shown 3 great fires so far: Chicago, New York, and London, with a total of 308 deaths that have a total of 31,490 buildings destroyed. This is impossible for 31,490 buildings to be engulfed in flames, with basically nobody dying. 308 deaths, to be exact. If you trusted the narrative before today, this day will be the final day that it is trusted ever again. Because in 1916, Paris, Texas also had a great fire where it destroyed everything in its path besides people. Because it destroyed 1,440 old world buildings where only 3 people died, moving the total old world buildings that were destroyed up to 32,930. 32,930 buildings gone. And could you imagine what these buildings, what these cities looked like, with the mainstream narrative admitting that these buildings were all here? And now they're gone. So again, 32,930 buildings are gone, with a total of now only 311 deaths, making this extremely clear that we are being lied to about something. Either the death totals were actually way higher than what we're being told, or these cities were basically empty. I've had a lot of people comment that they want me to include Canada and incorporate it into my research, and I can't wait to do that right now. Toronto, Canada, you're up. You had a great fire in 1904, destroying over 100 old world buildings. We know these were built by a much more advanced previous civilization. Buildings that would make 0 sense in our fabricated mainstream historical timeline, where we are given a massive fire, destroying everything in its path with a total of 0 deaths. Nobody, not a single person, not one person inhaled too much smoke for 2 to 10 minutes. In a great fire that took down over 100 buildings. In 1852, we are given the Great Fire of Montreal, Canada, where it left 10,000 people homeless. when 57,000 people in 1852 had hundreds of buildings, which isn't logical at all, or isn't mathematically probable in itself. If you think that Donkeys Incorporated saddled up in the early half of the 1800s and knocked out massive cities for only 57,000 people, I think it's time to reconsider what you've been told. When within a few hours, 1/4 of Montreal was destroyed. And yet again, nobody died. Nobody. Destroying almost half of the city's houses. In 1852, they all evacuated perfectly and ran to safety. Everybody? Not a single person had an issue? Do you understand what it would take for a fire to spread from house to house rapidly? We all understand that this fire would be massive. I know I'm being brutally honest, but a lot of people would have died. This would have been extremely catastrophic. This would not be a case of 0 deaths. In fact, it would have been nowhere near 0 deaths, and we all know this. This narrative of 0 casualties is simply not the true history of our past, where we are also told that 1,100 houses burned down. Nobody had an issue getting away from these fires. Not a single person. Fires that supposedly swept the streets to spread to the next house over and over in 1852. How were they just escaping this situation? You would think that somebody would have died from inhaling too much smoke. Now, this tells us 1,100 houses burned down, but leaves out the buildings. So let's just estimate that it was around the same as Toronto, adding another 100 buildings to that 1,100, moving the total buildings destroyed from these great fires to 34,230 buildings destroyed, and only 311 casualties. And remember, there are hundreds of great fire narratives that happen in a city near you. The mainstream history is suggesting that we are supposed to believe at this point that 110 buildings have to go down in flames for us to record 1 death. If this was 1 death per 22 buildings destroyed in these great fires, we would be at a much more realistic death total of 1,555 deaths, which is 1/5 the amount that we're being told. When realistically, it should be flipped. We should realistically have less death today per building than they would in the 1800s, since we have cars, phones, proper firefighters, and the rest. To say that 0 people in the 1800s died from a great fire that swept through the entire city, leaving the end result looking like massive bombs went off multiple times, is mathematically impossible. This is not a realistic narrative at all. And now that we have looked into this, compared it to other situations, shown factual evidence that they are lying in all of this, I want to give my opinion on what happened. I think that the population worldwide was basically 0 in the early 1800s. And I'm going to go into great detail on this in an upcoming episode. And this episode is basically a setup to lean into this topic of the population lie. But I think the previous civilization's population around the world before 1776, I would say 100 years prior to 1776, based on the condition that these buildings were in, it would put it at around 100 years, realistically. It couldn't have been thousands of years. These buildings would have just been a mess, just from the nature growing all over it and inside. But I believe the worldwide population in what we call the 15 or 1600s was massive. I believe that the technology was much more advanced than what we have today. And we are given back a very small percentage of this technology and told that it's brand new. And we all get excited and believe it. We are told that we are advancing when really we're just going around and around, getting the same exact technology as last time, or less than the previous civilization. And this is all based on control. The fact that they wrote these fake stories and made it so blatantly obvious that they are fake, saying that 0 people in massive fires, destroying all of their homes, all of their buildings, over and over and over. It really makes me think that they were just waiting for somebody to find this information, like it's some sort of test or some strange game, because it really is just so obvious once you see the lie. Now knowing what we know about the Great Fires, I'm going to cover a few more things that should just completely hammer it home for everyone here. First, let's say thank you to all of our badge members, all of our Patreons, and every single subscriber. You're all awesome and really helping grow this channel every single week, helping share this information with brand new people every single day. Here we have the Great Fire of Detroit in 1805, which was 29 years after the USA came around, and also 29 years after the New York Great Fire in 1776. Notice, nearly all of these great fires are happening after that date, and they tell us that nearly everything was destroyed. But yet again, nobody died. Where it starts in the stable again, and yet again, not a single death. Everything is destroyed. Nobody died. And this reminds me of the repeating narrative where they tell us that everything was built in a year perfectly, over and over and over, all over the world, by a guy and his donkey riding team with no power tools, no machines, no training. The stone shipping company coordinate the delivery right on time. The mud trails in the rain were never an issue. The freezing winters, they just told them to get over it and toughen up. And they get the whole building or cathedral done with no issues, done in 7 months. This kind of stuff is so repetitive in just a different way. These narratives hold patterns, and this is one of them. These fire narratives are all connected, and I don't personally think that they were fires. I think they were bombs and explosives. They were deliberate attacks on the old world buildings to hide our true past, our true history, which is exactly why we are all so confused as to where we are and what we're doing here. I really hope you all enjoyed learning about these great... Oh wait, what is this? Detroit only had 600 people during this massive Great Fire? What did 600 people need hundreds of buildings for in 1805? Well, the math doesn't lie, and it never will. These 600 people did not build these buildings. And I was gonna end this episode right there, but I just wanna make sure this is not a debate at all, and an episode that everyone can remember. 1916 Phoenix Great Fire, 80 buildings destroyed, 1 death. Miami, Florida, 1901, 2,368 buildings gone to the fire. Only 7 deaths from thousands of buildings. Only 7 deaths. Houston, Great Fire of 1912. The fire claimed 0 lives, but caused an estimated $7 million in damage to property, equating to $237 million today. And nobody died. I hope you all have a great rest of your day. I'll be back very soon with much more. See ya.